Having my first son leave for college back in August made me realize for the first time I'm not so young anymore. I'm now in the midst of those midlife years, and it's not easy. You work so hard to raise your children. You finally get through those preschool and grade school years. They have their bar mitzvah, and the next thing you know, they're off to college as far away from you as possible. And I can now understand why so many of us have such a difficult time with these midlife years. Hence the feared midlife crisis, prompting some to make some major out-of-character life changes. As a rabbi at a large congregation, I've truly seen it all. Some go out and change their careers. Some go out and buy a new Ferrari. Some go out and start hanging out at late night clubs with people half their age. What does a rabbi do? I write a Yom Kippur sermon. Not so exciting, but a very safe thing to do. This sermon is my hope for keeping me from having a real midlife crisis. If you see me driving a Ferrari next week, you'll see that something went terribly wrong. And if you see me in a club at 2 a.m, then I'm in real trouble. And perhaps you are as well. So why is it so difficult to avoid a midlife crisis? Because at some point in these midlife years, we may be confronting our number one fear for the very first time. My colleague, Rabbi Manis Friedman, once taught, what is our number one fear? It's not losing a job or our health or, God forbid, a tragedy. No, our biggest fear is that our life will have no meaning. This is our ultimate fear. The possibility that we have found no real meaning in our lives, that our lives, our time in this world, made no real difference in this world. And as some of us approach these midpoint years in our lives, we may see that our children don't need us as much. At the same time, as most of us cannot do as much as we used to do physically, we finally see the beginning of the end. And so we may ask ourselves for the very first time, where is that life's meaning that I thought I would have by now? Or if I found meaning in raising my children, now that they're out of the house, where will I find it now? And here's what makes it even more difficult for us as Americans, more than ever before. From birth, we're conditioned to spend our lives searching not for meaning, but for happiness. And as Americans in this country with so much prosperity, from the day we're born, we're taught to search for that happiness by acquiring more and more money. But if that was the answer, all rich people would be happy. We also search for happiness through fame. But if that was the answer, many movie and music stars would not be the addiction-prone casualties of society that they are too often. It's no wonder that our society has never been this unhappy. Despite our very high standard of living, we continue to fall behind other Western countries in our overall level of happiness. The most telling signs of unhappiness, drug and alcohol abuse, depressive illness, stress-related syndromes, and the rest have risen by between 300 and 1,000% in the span of just 2 generations. Is it because in our endless search for pleasure and joy, too often we forget to search for what actually can bring us true happiness? Meaning. It's meaning that brings us the happiness we seek. Recently, a 25-year study was completed by the National Institute of Mental Health to assess happiness. The study revealed that people who were the most happy were those who could find meaning in their careers, in taking care of their loved ones, or in contributing to our society. As it's been said many times, happiness is not how much money you have. It's not about fame or popularity. Happiness is appreciating what you've done meaningful that will outlast you. Too many people, when confronted with these difficult midlife years, don't know where to find real meaning. But instead, some try to create quick fixes, sudden burst of happiness, that new Ferrari or after years of marriage, that new girlfriend or boyfriend. But as I've often seen, they soon realize that that sudden excitement of something new eventually subsides, and they end up even more miserable. Why? Because there was no real meaning in that quick burst of excitement. Meaning is about a sense of purpose in life. It's about the search for something larger than the self. Instead of asking, what do I need? It's about asking, what am I needed for? But some don't live for something. They simply live by way of sheer physical inertia. The problem is when we go through life on autopilot, when we suddenly realize that we're getting older and we're not sure what we've accomplished, we can be left with a feeling of dissatisfaction, regrets, even depression, the perfect recipe for a very tough midlife crisis. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs once wrote, some people live without a compass or a sense of purpose. Some people, and these people, such people can spend months planning a lavish party or a vacation, but not a single day to plan a lifetime. Yes, people who spend their lives dedicated to finding their own beautiful sense of significance are less likely to have a midlife crisis. Growing older is much easier. Those who live with a greater awareness of not just their physical needs, but also their spiritual needs, tend to handle those midlife years in a much better way. Our Jewish tradition often invites us to live forcefully, with passion, steady intellectual growth, and with the dignity of a spiritual purpose. To try to leave an impactful existence whose effects will continue to reverberate long after we're physically gone. But just in case we forget, in all the busyness of everyday life, there's an annual wake-up call to help us. Yom Kippur, this day, is our annual yearly wake-up call. It grips us by the arms and says to every single one of us, life is too short. It's really short. And some of you may be seeing that now for the very first time. So today, this day, it's not about trivial matters. It's not about how much money you made this past year. It's not about your new home or your new car. It's really about finding the ultimate meaning. Therefore, today, you as Jews are going to do something you never do. You're actually going to rehearse death. That's right. Our tradition tells us, Yom Kippur calls out to us, today you won't eat, you won't drink, you'll give up all those great pleasures of life for one full day. Some of you will even wear a kittel or a white robe, a symbol of the plain white shroud we'll all wear one day when we're buried. Yom Kippur also says to us, as part of your prayers, you'll even recite the Vidui, as we did last night and we'll do again today. The final confessional prayer, we'll actually say it in our prayers, and it's the same prayer that one day we'll say on our deathbed. Yom Kippur even says, I'll add Yizkor to the day, to make sure you see that this day is truly about something more. And you'll have Yizkor just to make sure you stay at services. On a quick side note, I always get a few calls right before Yom Kippur asking, Rabbi, what time is Yizkor? They, of course, want to know how late they can arrive or how quickly they can leave. I had an older rabbi once tell me that just to play with people, he would answer, Yizkor is sometime between 9 a.m. and 4 p.m. I'm not sure how long he lasted at his synagogue. Why on earth, why did the great rabbis of our tradition give us a day when we actually rehearse our own deaths? Because the great hope is, by having this annual brush with death, we'll see it as a wake-up call that life is so brief, so precarious, and so precious. We will be forced to ask ourselves the most fundamental Jewish question of all. Am I making a positive difference in this world? Yom Kippur calls out to you. Answer this question now, because one day, unfortunately, the end will come, quicker than you may realize. Yom Kippur allows us to confront our very uncomfortable feelings about death, so we can affirm the way we live our lives. Yes, our tradition realizes that we don't want to talk about death. Who would? Especially our own. And our own deaths, we may think it's absurd. We're healthy. We take vitamins and fish oil. We do yoga, Pilates. We exercise. We meditate. None of us wants to believe we're mortal. We can't imagine our non-existence, and so we deny the possibility of our disappearance. So we do everything we can to avoid talking about death. Sometimes we like to live in denial. Look at the language we use. We say passed away, or that they're in a better place now. We don't seem to want to talk about it at all. And when we do, we only talk about death at funerals, in hospitals, or in law offices. But by doing so, we miss out on the chance for the richness and value that can come from facing our mortality head on. When we do contemplate our mortality, it doesn't have to be dark or morbid, because by doing so, we're actually contemplating our life. Psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross puts it best. She writes, "It's the denial of death in America today that is partially responsible for people living empty, aimless lives. For when you live as if you'll live forever, it becomes too easy to postpone the things you know that you must do. In contrast, when you fully understand that each day you awaken could be the last you have, you take the time that day to grow, to become more of who you really are, and to truly reach out to other human beings." Or as Rabbi Eliezer teaches us, repent one day before your death. When his students asked him the obvious question, "But how will we know which day that is?" he responded, "Exactly. For that reason, we must live every day as though it were our last." As a rabbi of a large synagogue such as ours, I'm at many funerals. You would think it would be overwhelmingly depressing. And trust me, it can be at times. We lose too many good people every single year. Many of those extraordinary people that you're thinking of today. What I've also found, to my great surprise, is that living life with a real awareness of its eventual end can also change the way you live for the better. It's actually freed me from being enslaved to what I know in my heart doesn't really matter. It constantly reminds me life is too short to be little. So it makes it a little easier for me to concentrate on the more important, truly meaningful parts of my life. Every experience is more significant when I'm more aware that it might never be repeated. I know none of you will be at the same amount of funerals as I will be this year, but my hope as your senior rabbi is to help you live your life with the same clarity and insight I've started to gain as a rabbi. That is why this year, as a community, we're going to tackle the subject of death, not to depress us, but rather to help us, if we need it, to bring more meaning into our lives now before it's too late. As you can see from this card in your seats, during this new year, we're planning weekends, visiting scholars, classes, panel discussions, dealing with ethical wills, advanced directives, Jewish views of reincarnation, the mortality and the morality of physician-assisted suicide, the wisdom of our morning rituals and practices, and what we as Jews really believe about the afterlife. You may be surprised by what we believe. For example, our tradition has a lot to say about the afterlife. One, the rabbis of the Talmud suggest that in heaven, thousands of rabbis will teach Torah and give sermons all day long. For some, this will be heaven, and for others, this will be hell. But not for any of you. Now let me share one more idea about heaven that may make all of you feel better, an idea that has changed my life. Our tradition teaches that our souls are eternal. And in Judaism, we develop our souls not through our beliefs, but through our actions. We do it through generosity we demonstrate in the righteous deeds we commit. When you go above and beyond to help someone in need, that great feeling you get afterwards, when your soul's been moved because you know that you've helped someone. That's the type of pleasure we'll find in heaven. Or when you could have done something wrong. Maybe you could have cheated a customer at work and gotten away with it. But you make the right decision not to do so. That satisfaction you feel afterwards, that's the type of satisfaction our sources say that you'll feel in heaven. Or when you make the effort to spend quality time with those you love, that great sense of fulfillment, that's the type of meaning you'll find in heaven. And that fits with a very helpful analogy describing the world to come. Heaven is like a large stadium. For those who spent their lives helping others and feeling pleasure from doing those good deeds, they'll be familiar with the same pleasurable feelings we will find in heaven. They spent their lives experiencing them, so heaven will be even more comfortable and better. They'll enjoy the pleasures of heaven so much, it will be as if they're sitting on the 50-yard line. But for those who spent their lives not doing good deeds, then the pleasures of heaven won't feel as great because they won't be able to relate to those pleasures. It will be as if they're sitting high above the end zone seat in the nosebleed seats at an eternal Texans game, not with Deshaun Watson as quarterback, but with David Carr as quarterback. They'll have seats in the stadium. They just won't enjoy the experience so much. Having this knowledge and many, many more values and ideas and beliefs about what we actually believe about end-of-life issues, about heaven, about the afterlife, pushes me every single day to try to do even more, to check myself often to make sure I am finding more meaning in my life and helping others find it as well. My goal this year is that you too will learn more, so you will do the same. Through our year-long discussion, I want all of you to discuss more and learn more about what we actually believe as Jews about death. Our Christian friends do a much better job of this. We need to do a good job on this. We need to talk about these issues so you know more, you're more informed, and that you can live, I believe, a more meaningful life. Because by doing so, I pray that not only will some of us be able to prevent any midlife crisis, but all of us will be able to get an increasing amount out of our lives now while we are blessed to be alive. As our rabbis teach, yes, we believe in life after death, but it is in the life before death that we truly find human greatness. This new year at Beth Yeshurun will be a life of meaning. We can live more fully when we realize we will not live forever. Gamar Hatima Tova. May we all be written for a good year of peace, meaning, and Jewish growth. Amen.